Hey Guardians, I just want to let everyone know that I do have both a Twitch and a Twitter, and I'm very active on both. Feel free to come give me a follow on both, links in the description. Guardians, with the slew of nostalgia weapons that came with Onslaught, we've seen the return of Midnight Coup with an updated perk pool and stats. Now, I've seen some people raving about this hand cannon, and while I think this weapon is more of a mixed experience, this will be a mostly positive review. There's good stuff here for PvP and for PvE. Now, starting with PvP, if you were to ask me what the top 3 legendary Kinetic 140 hand cannons in Destiny 2 are, I would say Rose, then Ias Luna, then Austringer, and that hasn't changed with Midnight Coup. Like I said, it's a good weapon, but there are some issues here. To start, this weapon is extremely role dependent. Midnight Coup is lacking range and stability. If you really want to use this weapon in PvP, you should be farming for a 5 out of 5, and anything short of that should just be shards. Really, the key thing here is making sure you have the right barrel, mag, and masterwork. There's more to work with in the last 2 columns. The next thing, of course, is this is a Kinetic 140 hand cannon, and that comes with some downsides. First off, 140s are vastly inferior to 120s in nearly every way. 120s flinch harder and have far more range, and while 140s do have a faster base TTK, that doesn't mean much when the dude with Igneous Hammer is removing a chunk of your soul from 40 plus meters every time he pulls the trigger. So if your goal is to be as competitive as possible and you really want to use a 140, you should probably just put on Hawkmoon. Also, kinetic weapons do kind of get the shaft inside of PvP. Targeting, handling, and unflinching mods are all very expensive on kinetic weapons, and there are no harmonizer mods for them. The main upside to Midnight Coup is it does have some unique roles that let it do things that other hand cannons just can't. So, with that in mind, let's move on to roles. For your barrel, go with small bore or hammer forged rifling. For your magazine, go with accurized rounds, and for your masterwork, you want range. Midnight Coup is a little range starved, but as long as you can get between 60 to 70 range, you're pretty well good to go. Hammer forged rifling will give you slightly more range than small bore, but small bore does offer stability as well, so keep that in mind. Now, in those third and fourth columns, there are some very interesting combos here. In the third column, you have moving target, explosive payload, and enlightened action. Fourth column, Zen Moment or opening shot, maybe frenzy if you can take advantage of it. Now, my favorite option in the third column is actually moving target for one reason. Midnight Coup has the highest base aim assist stat of any legendary hand cannon in the entire game. The only hand cannon with higher aim assist is Hawkmoon with 93. Moving target will give you an additional 10 aim assist whenever you aim down your sights, and you'll be using your sights for 99% of your gunfights with a hand cannon. This means with Midnight Coup's base aim assist of 90, you'll almost always have 100 aim assist, and this does have some benefits. For one thing, you can just completely ditch targeting mods on your helmet and replace them with something else. Targeting mods for your secondary weapon, maybe Dynamo, so on and so forth. You can also very comfortably ditch a targeting mod on the weapon and replace it with Icarus, Quick Action Sling, Hipfire Grip, Backup Mag, so on and so forth. Then, in the fourth column, my favorite option is unsurprisingly Zen Moment. Zen Moment is arguably the best dueling perk in the entire game. As long as you're landing your shots, Zen Moment will reduce your recoil, screen shake, and give you some serious flinch resistance. And the benefits here are huge. Midnight Coup struggles with stability, and Zen Moment fixes this. Now, even with Zen, I wouldn't drop below 45 stability regardless, but as long as you're at that point or above, you're pretty well good to go, though you may want to go higher if you're on a controller. Then, with the amount of flinch resistance Zen gives you, you'll have a much easier time landing your shots in a head-on gunfight, and it gives you enough resistance that you might be able to drop an unflinching mod or two and again replace them with something else. I find this is particularly nice on Hunter, where you're pretty much always starved for stats. So with moving target and Zen Moment, you have max aim assist, high flinch resistance, and high recoil reduction, and the ability to drop some of those insanely expensive kinetic weapon mods. Now, that's not to say this is the only good role here, that one is just my favorite, but there are plenty of others as well, such as explosive payload with Zen Moment. Flinch your opponent harder with payload while Zen Moment is reducing your flinch. Alternatively, moving target and opening shot. Yes, moving target is a bit redundant, but the first shot stability will still feel good, and your first shot will be the size of a semi-truck, so that is still an option. Then obviously payload with opening shot, huge flinch and an aim assist bump on your first shot. Still an incredible combo. Enlightened Action is probably my least favorite perk overall here, but it's still an okay option and will work with Zen or opening shot just fine. The main benefit to Enlightened Action is hand cannons will give you 3 stacks of it per hit, and it will boost your reload speed, which is very helpful on hand cannons. Enlightened Action will boost your handling too, but the effects of this perk only last for around 2 seconds, so the value there is basically non-existent. There are plenty of good combos in those last 2 columns, and they will get even better when Final Shape arrives and we can enhance them. The main issue is really just getting the barrel, magazine, and masterwork where you want. Now, as far as performance, Midnight Coup is mixed. It has very clean sights, the weapon model is very unobtrusive, and the insanely high aim assist stat makes landing shot with it sometimes very easy. I say sometimes because one of the weapon's quirks is there are times where I felt like I just could not miss with it, and other times where I could not hit anything with it. That sort of inconsistency is not something I feel with other weapons. And this, I think, is directly linked to my main issue with Coup, and that is the recoil. I do not know what it is about it, but the recoil just feels very jarring when compared to other hand cannons. Granted, I've mostly been using low stability rolls, but I use hand cannons with low stability all the time. Some of my favorite Rose rolls only have around 40 to 45 stability. Ace only has 50 stability, and the recoil on Coup just feels harsher than those weapons. That's the big reason Zen Moment is my favorite option in the last column. It benefits the overall feel of this weapon massively. On top of this, Coup has some pretty extreme deviation when you pull the trigger. With its base recoil of direction of 80, it pulls hard to the right. If you throw on a counterbalance, it pulls to the left, but not quite as harshly, so personally I do like to use a counterbalance on it. But of course, weapon feel is entirely subjective, and you may very well love everything about how Coup feels. So for PvP, Midnight Coup offers some very unique rolls with some very high utilities that other hand cannons just don't have, such as max aim assist with moving target and high flinch resistance and stability with Zen Moment. The biggest issue with this weapon overall is it has to be mid-maxed perfectly with its stats, so if you don't get a 5 out of 5, it's just free shards. The main thing to keep in mind with Coup is you need to use it appropriately. It falls under the same category as something like Rose or Spare Rations. Midnight Coup is a brawler. You will need to use it in a more aggressive and mobile manner. It does not have the range to sit back in lane. It is a very playstyle dependent hand cannon. So Coup is a good weapon. You'll just have to decide if it's worth the time to grind for it in an activity that takes as long as Onslaught. Now, for me it is. I mostly like the weapon, and I always like having a variety of weapons to choose from, but it might not be for you, so keep that in mind before you commit to dedicating days to farming Onslaught. What I will say is this weapon definitely will not be replacing my Roses anytime soon. Now, in PvE, we have some very good options here. Firefly, Shoot to Loot, and Payload in the 3rd column, Rampage, Frenzy, and Desperate Measures in the 4th column. Why didn't I mention Kinetic Tremors? Well, Kinetic Tremors is literally worthless on a hand cannon. Kinetic Tremors takes 6 shots to proc on a hand cannon. That's half your magazine for 1 Tremors blast, and if you're fighting something that takes that many shots from a hand cannon, it is probably time to pull out a special or a heavy weapon, and no, Explosive Payload unfortunately does not proc Tremors any faster, so if you get a Kinetic Tremors roll, you can safely get rid of it. Now, given that primaries are mostly used for ad clear, my favorite combo is going to be Firefly with either Frenzy, One for All, or Rampage. You can get free damage from Frenzy or One for All, or damage on a kill from Rampage, and then get explosions on kills from Firefly. My second choice would be Explosive Payload with One for All, so that if I fire into a group of ads, the AoE from Payload might proc One for All. And of course, Shoot to Loot isn't necessarily bad either, but it wouldn't be one of my top choices in that 3rd column. But if you do want to go with Shoot to Loot, I would recommend pairing it with Explosive Payload, since the AoE from Payload can pick up equipped, special ammo, heavy ammo, so on and so forth. So Midnight Coup has some very good PvE options, and while I know most of you are probably just going to default to Sunshot, if you're using an exotic heavy or special, then this is actually a very good option. And the good news is it is not nearly as role dependent in PvE. In PvP, having that perfect roll with mid-max stats is extremely important because you're fighting human opponents. But in PvE, as long as you have a good combo in those third and fourth columns, you're pretty well good to go. Plus, in the vast majority of PvE activities, your abilities are going to carry you regardless. This is one of the reasons PvP players tend to love crafting. The grind for random drop loot is a lot more painful when the full roll on your weapon actually matters. So, overall, Midnight Coup is a good hand cannon. Not a perfect one. In PvP, it certainly is not S tier, but it's still a very good hand cannon and a very strong one with the right roll. And in PvE, it's a fantastic choice for a legendary primary, even though I know, yes, most of us are just going to default to Sunshot regardless. That's all from me today, Guardians. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful or informative, do me a favor, hit that like button and leave me a comment with your thoughts on Coup. As always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button with the bell icon and share this video with anyone you think might find it interesting, helpful, entertaining, so on and so forth. Those are the best ways to support the channel. For now, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, Guardians.